many years from now, would you be willing to trade all the days from this day to that for one chance, just one chance, to come back here and tell our enemies that they may take our lives, but they'll never take our freedom!
To Anti-Tyranny News Radio here on UCY.TV. Thank you for joining me this evening. I'm going to start getting into the economy first off here. We're seeing the Dow, up 1.82%. NASDAQ is up 2.46%. S&P 500 is up 1.83%. And we kind of seen this back and forth with it, but I don't think we're seeing the bigger picture, and I think it's really going to come to grips with many people here throughout the year, the upcoming year. But some are even raising concerns if we'll make it to next year before we see a total global collapse. And I don't think that we should take it lightly either. I think the possibility is definitely there. But if it continues on more of a gradual pace, I think we still will see it within the next year. We have one article here, this one out of CBS Money Watch, cbsnews.com. The surging ranks of America's ultra-poor. By one dismal measure, America is joining the likes of third world countries. The number of U.S. residents who are struggling to survive on just $2 a day has more than doubled since 1996, placing 1.5 million households and 3 million children in the desperate economic situation. That's according to $2 a day living on almost nothing in America, a book from publisher Houghton Mifflin Harcourt that will be released on September 1st. The measure of poverty isn't arbitrary. It's the threshold the World Bank uses to measure global poverty in the developed world. While it may be the norm to see families in developing countries such as Bangladesh and Ethiopia struggle to survive on such meager income, the growing ranks of America's ultra-poor may be shocking, given that the U.S. is considered one of the most developed capitalist countries in the world. Well, yeah, if you believe the rhetoric, we know it to be crony capitalism or corporatism, which is not free market capitalism. Most of us would say we would have trouble understanding how families in the country as rich as ours could live on so little, said Arthur Catherine Eden, who spoke on a conference call to discuss a book which she wrote with Luke Schaefer. Eden is the Bloomberg Distinguished Professor of Sociology at Johns Hopkins University. These families, contrary to what many would expect, are workers, and their slide into poverty is a failure of the labor market and our safety net as well as their own personal circumstances. To be sure, the labor market has been rocky for many Americans, not just the poorest, but changes in how employers deal with their low-wage workers have hit many of these poor Americans especially hard, such as the rise of on-call scheduling, which leaves some parents scrambling for hours and dealing with unpredictable pay. Retailers such as Walmart and fast food companies increasingly are using sophisticated scheduling software that allows them to tinker with work schedules at the last minute depending on their store's needs. That reduces costs for the employer, but it can make life difficult for employees, especially those with children and dependents. Time and time again, we would constantly see people's hours cut from week to week, said Schaefer, associate professor of social work at University of Michigan. Someone might have 30 hours one week, down to 15 the next, and down to 5 after that. We saw people who would remain employed but were down to 0 hours. This was incredibly common in this population. And that article goes on. I have another one right here from the Daily Signal that says Walmart reduces employee hours following wage increase. Walmart has been reducing the number of hours employees work in some of its stores following a wage increase earlier this year, according to a report by Bloomberg. The report says regional executives told store managers at the retailer's annual holiday planning meeting this month to rein in expenses by cutting worker hours. They've added beyond those allocated to them based on sales projections. Bloomberg continued the request has resulted in some stores trimming hours from their schedules, asking employees to leave shifts early or telling them to take longer lunches, according to more than 36 employees from around the U.S. The reduction started in the past several weeks, even as many stores enter the busy back-to-school shopping period. In February, Walmart announced that it would raise its entry-level wage to $9 an hour. The wage increase took place in April. Opponents of minimum wage increase noted that Walmart's decision to cut employees' hours in some of its stores came after the wage hike. Matt Makowiak on Twitter said, single strongest reason not to increase the minimum wage. Professor Steve Hank, Walmart's profits are directly affected by wage increases as compensation costs are passed to consumers. A spokeswoman for Walmart denied a correlation between the reduction in hours and the wage increase, attributing the reduction in hours to overscheduling at individual stores. Earlier this year, Walmart committed to investing an additional $1 billion in our associates through wages, training, scheduling, staffing. Corey Lundberg, the director of national media relations at Walmart, said in a statement provided to the Daily Signal. And you can read the rest of the article there at the Daily Signal. That first article I went over was at cbsnews.com, and that one was titled The Surging Ranks of America's Ultra Poor. And the one from Daily Signal was Walmart reduces employee hours following wage increase. I want to pull this up here on CBS News. And when you go to CBS News, go to markets.cbsnews.com, and they'll have the market day. Click on, the Dow, or you can look at the other ones. and you look at our 1 week, or we look at just today. Let's look at today. You know, we went from just over, says here, hold on, 16,200 to above 16,300. It looks like we're doing pretty good. You look at the week, you see that in a week's time, we're down about half. Look at a month. Oh, a month, we go down even another half. 3 months. You look at 1 year. You look at 1 year, and we've fallen off a cliff. This is actually reflecting what our economy is actually sitting at. This bubble that was created was not going to last, and I don't even think it's fully popped yet, because I think it's a mix between a domestic bubble and an international bubble. Year to date, negative 9.90%. 1 month, negative 9.22%. 3 months, negative 10.99%. 6 months. And the first one was year to date. You go to the full year, negative 6.08%. But 6 months, the last 6 months, our performance is negative 11.44%. So when you look at 1 month, 3 months, 6 months, we've been on a downslide. We're not coming and bouncing back to full strength. We never do. We always have a illusion of it. But when the dollar in your pocket loses money or loses value, you're losing money. I'm going to get into a Ron Paul Liberty report here, the war on cash. And we'll go over some more of this after the Ron Paul Liberty report, the war on cash.
Hello, everybody, and thank you for tuning in to the Liberty Report. With me today is Daniel McAdams. Daniel, good to see you.
Good morning, Dr. Paul.
Good. We have a special guest today, and he's been a friend of ours as well as a friend of Liberty and has been teaching Austrian economics for a long time. He's a professor at Pace University, and he's also the academic vice president of the Mises Institute. He has an MA and a PhD from Rutgers University, but most importantly, he is a close follower of Murray Rothbard. He believes in very limited government, if any, but he has come to Washington on a couple occasions for me when I was in Congress to testify. So I would like to welcome Joe Salerno to our meeting here today in our program.
Hello, Dr. Paul. It's a pleasure to be here.
Great. You know, one of the reasons we wanted to visit with you today is you are the noted expert in the Austrian school on monetary policy. And most people think of money as things that we always just put in our pocket, and that is true. It used to be that we could always eventually put the money in our pocket, and that's what a true gold standard would be all about, is that you can always convert the note or the promise to pay into something of real value and put it into your pocket. But today we have a silly system of Federal Reserve notes. We can put them in our pockets, but it gives some people more freedom than our government likes. And, just as in the 30s, our government didn't like the freedom that people could actually keep their gold in their pockets to protect against runaway government, they had to crack down. And just think how many years in the 20th century we as Americans weren't even allowed to own gold. But here it is that the substitute is the dollar reserve standard, paper money. And some people still think that there's a little bit of freedom in holding cash, and I think this has been brought to our attention with the Greek crisis. So now it looks like some governments, and who knows, maybe even our government someday might attack the use of cash. This is something you've written about and talked about. How serious is this problem, and how do you see this playing out?
It's a very serious problem. Even though it's fiat money, the cash that we hold does give us anonymity. That is anonymity in our very private financial dealings. And the governments hate this. I mean, they began a war. So certainly the U.S. government initiated the war in 1970 with the Bank Secrecy Act. The aim, of course, the stated aim was to stop money laundering, prevent organized crime from flourishing, and so on. But really what it did was to open up the banks, to open up their records to federal agents and so on, so that they could track us. And I find this very disturbing, and it's only grown since the 1970s.
Well, and it looks like it's not just a U.S. problem, because people in Greece obviously were looking to hold their cash. But, the cash, I don't know if we have that chart on cash today. Our Federal Reserve has a chart, from the St. Louis Fed to show the escalation of cash. And it's rather dramatic. That one little blip about 2/3 over is the blip the year 2000 on Y2K. But look at the escalation. And it went up from $800 billion to $1.4 trillion since this crisis hit. But I understand, and I wondered if this number is right, that only about 30% of these cash holdings are actually in the United States with American citizens, which raises the question, if we moved in that direction, don't they have an international challenge here? And how would this work? Is there any chance they could be successful without putting everybody in a concentration camp? It seems like it would be an overwhelming problem even for the authoritarians.
No, you're absolutely right. In fact, the Federal Reserve itself has done studies on this and found in the 80s and 90s that 2/3 of the cash was outside the country, of U.S. Paper dollars, and 80% of the $100 bills were being used outside the country in black markets for drug deals and so on. So it would be impossible for them to suppress all the cash without, as you said, throwing everybody into some sort of concentration camp. They're very, very fearful of cash for a second reason, and that is that it really undermines our fractional reserve banks. It gives a power to the people that are holding the accounts in the banks. It allows them to withdraw at any time their cash. And this is something that the banks are against. We see Chase coming out with rules saying things like that they're not going to accept cash in payment for your mortgage and credit cards, and that you're not permitted any longer to keep cash in your safe deposit boxes or coins.
Professor.
So yeah, they have a big row to hoe.
Right.
I was just going to say, Professor, something about holding cash intrinsically feels good. I worked for a number of years overseas, and I would line up at the end of the month and get a big stack of cash. And so everything I purchased was completely anonymous. I did no business whatsoever electronically. Unfortunately, the trend now overseas in Europe, as you've pointed out, I think in several interviews you've given, is to move in this direction of a cashless society. You also mentioned, and I found this particularly interesting, is the war on cash is a way to sort of manipulate spending habits. If you get rid of cash, you can do things like negative interest rates and force people to spend at certain times and not at others. Is this something that you think is serious?
Yeah, yes, I think it is, because it's being pushed by very prominent mainstream economists who are in positions of power in the IMF and in the U.S. Lee Rogoff comes to mind, and other Willem Weeder comes to mind. They're pushing for an end to cash so that there can be manipulation of the of spending habits, as you put it. In fact, just yesterday or the day before, there was an article in which I think it was the Financial Times was calling cash a barbarous relic. So just as Keynes called gold a barbarous relic and wanted to stamp it out and did succeed to a great extent in stamping it out, they're now going after cash. Keynes' heirs, the Keynesian macroeconomists. And this is very scary.
You know, the barbarous relic reminds me of what Henry Royce said in the 70s. If we ever legalize gold again, he said it didn't bother him any because the market would drive the price of gold down to $5. So I guess that was an unintended consequence. Instead of going to 5, it didn't take too many years. It went up to 800. So, but what about this possibility or the danger of the control of cash as being so destructive to privacy, not only financial, but privacy in the sense of we have the NSA spying and doing everything whatsoever. But, you know, if you had only control of your cash, where you had no chance to do something outside of the control of the government of every penny, that sounds like it could be as ominous as the NSA. But then again, what if they're working together? This could be, you know, a real clincher. Then they wouldn't even have to maybe, you know, call in all the cash around the world because that would be devastating to the dollar. But they could put the controls here on us in the United States.
Yeah, I think that's true. And in fact, the French premier last year drew parallels between the war on terror and the war on cash. He said that you know, terrorists use cash to bomb Charles Hebdo and the Jewish supermarket, and so therefore, you know, cash was evil. But they also wore shoes and they also wore clothing and used streets and so on. But you don't outlaw those things. So they're using the war on terror as a cover to get at cash.
Right.
And it's actually, as you've written, Professor, it's come home in a very concrete way. You mentioned before the Louisiana's ban on secondhand dealers. And to me, I mean, if you could explain that, it would be fascinating, I think, to the viewers who don't know about it. But it seems to me that this really will affect the poor much more disproportionately because they tend to, I think, deal in cash more.
Yes, in Louisiana, they did it was in 2011. It sort of flew under the radar and became noticed last year. But anyway, the state legislature passed a law which mandated secondhand dealers defined as Goodwill stores, flea markets, garage sales, to report any cash transactions, any transactions in which they were receiving or paying cash. And they had to report them on a daily basis to the local police authorities. Who could and also to get the seller's name, license plate number, and a number of other private details. And so this is a first step. Fortunately, it's only on the state level. This would be awful if it was imposed on the federal level.
You know, the one other consequence that may come may show the evidence that real money might be able to override paper money, and that is, if they really crack down and they're able to and make it just horrible for you to spend a Federal Reserve note in this country, that maybe some transactions would occur with American silver dollars or gold dollars or whatnot, which again might be then made illegal, but at least it might be the market answer to it. If times were very chaotic, I believe they might do that. But right now, you know, they could, I believe, really crack down. They've gone through this conditioning process, which is both market-oriented as well as people liking the convenience. But a lot of people use cash for buying use a credit card for buying a Coke. I never believed that we would get to that point, but it's just so routine. But what do you think that if things got worse, do you think people would still possibly resort to gold and silver?
Yeah, no, I think actually a silver lining for us and an unintended consequence for them, for the powers that be, is that this war on cash could cause the remonetization of silver, the informal remonetization of silver and gold, and I would look forward to that. I mean, that would be a great benefit. I think Americans would do that.
Yeah. You know, the other group of people, Daniel mentioned about poor people being penalized. Well, already the elderly have been penalized with their savings because they don't make any interest. And when I've asked Federal Reserve Board chairmen on several occasions, different chairmen, They said, well, that's just one of the penalties that we have to put up with. They didn't deny that it was really hurting retired people, and they weren't earning any interest, and the market was saying interest should be 5, 6, or 7%. So they were penalizing them, but we had to save the whole system. That is, the financial Wall Street people, they want to say. But what about the immigrants? This might be something, this anti-immigration hectoring, by the Republican candidates right now. They might like this because it's really going to hurt the immigrants, because a lot of immigrants, legal and illegal, come in here and they get paid in cash. This could have some economic consequences as well, and if they're able to crack down, it's going to penalize a lot of Americans, as well as it's going to be very anti-immigrant, which I guess some people might be satisfied with.
Yeah, I think you're right about lower income people being hurt by this. I know in Italy is very resistant to this war against cash. At least the people are, because 1/3 of the people are poor and do not have bank accounts. So, and also in parts of rural Sweden, they've sort of resisted, and because it does hurt lower income types that do not have other means of making transactions.
Well, what do you think is going to happen? Do you think there's going to be just this meandering with the talk and go on a long time, or do you think the current crisis might get a lot worse, where they could all of a sudden come down and think it is in their interest to crack down? How far out do you think that this might go before they,
Well, I mean, if the crisis becomes worse, I think what they're going to try to do is to impose these negative interest rates. They've floated the idea. It's been talked about in the press. The Financial Times was very in favor of it when it claimed that, cash to barber's relic was preventing the Fed from using all the tools at its disposal. I think this could come in the next couple of years. If they have to bail out the financial system again, which I don't know if they're going to be able to do, but that will be one of the things that they do. They'll lock the cash in the banks to prevent it from escaping and destabilizing these fractional reserve banks, which are still in a very fragile state.
Right. I have a couple of other questions, not directly related to the cashless side, but I wanted to get your opinion on this. And that is the way government manipulate the statistics. Generally, when I look at them, I look at them and try to interpret how the market might interpret them, but I don't believe, what the government tells us is actually the case. And the two statistics, both economically speaking as well as manipulation by government, that would be the CPI. Why should we question, or should we question, the CPI as well as GDP figures? It seems like, boy, those are big issues. The CPI, dictates if we could only get inflation rate up to 2%, it'll be magic. And then also, if the GDP is going up at a certain amount, everybody is happy. How do you see those two important statistics, at least for the financial markets?
I don't see them as being important to. They're not, let's say, accurate. They're not. They don't genuinely reflect the amount of income being produced in the economy, that is the GDP, nor the rate of inflation in the economy. The CPI is deeply flawed. There's new products coming out all the time. There's higher quality products coming out all the time. They try to use these very, very sophisticated mathematical techniques to measure quality, which is inherently impossible. So what they do is basically anything they do always makes the inflation rate appear lower. So, if your car goes up by 10%, they say, well, you have new airbags or better airbags. So it didn't really go up by 10%. The cars only went up by 5%. So I think this is all arbitrary.
So you're probably not a fan of the Taylor rule. I wouldn't think so.
No, not at all.
Right.
It's just another way of manipulating the money supply.
Okay, we're going to have to go here in a minute or two, but I did want to ask you a little bit about your career. How many years have you actually been teaching students, and during that entire period, were you always an Austrian economist?
Yeah, I've been teaching students since, as a graduate student, in 1974 I began teaching. And I had the fortune to meet Murray Rothbard very early in my graduate career. So, I've known Murray Rothbard, or I did know Murray Rothbard from 1972. So pretty much since I was a graduate student, I've been in Austria. Actually, even before that, I had heard of him in my undergraduate college. So I've been in Austria all that time, and I've been a friend of Murray's until he passed in 1995. And he inspired me, and I try to give to my students the lessons that he taught me.
Okay, how would you compare this average student that comes to your classes? Do they all have to, did you have courses where they were required to come to your class, or did everybody have to make a choice to come to your class?
Well, I have some of both. I mean, some are required courses, but some are, courses that I teach that are electives, and that they can choose me. And I've gotten a reputation as being an Austrian economist, though I don't flaunt it. I don't argue with my colleagues. I mean, I'm on very good terms. And the students come. What
have you noticed any difference between the average student coming to see you in the 70s, mid 70s, and of course there was exciting things going on there with the breakdown of Bretton Woods, versus students that come in now? How do you compare the students as far as them receiving the message of the Austrian school, and how do you see any significant difference?
The students coming in now are more career-oriented, but that also means that they're more clear-eyed about the future. They want to know what's going to happen with inflation. Are there going to be good jobs for them when they graduate or they get their MBA degrees? And so they are very willing to listen to different points of view now, especially since they feel that what's been going on up to this point during their lives has really failed to deliver to us a prosperous and high employment economy. So in that sense, I think I like the students better that I've had in the last decade or so.
Well, Joe, we have to run now, but I want to thank you very much, being with us today. You've taught a lot of students. You'll never know how many of you've influenced and how much that message has spread. One time I had talked to Hans Sandholz about this, and he had influenced a lot of students over the years at Grove City, and many of those students, came through my congressional office. But you've done a lot of great work, and your work with the Mises Institute has been great. But thank you very much, because this will make the difference. You've heard me speak before, and you know my emphasis on education over politics. And the politicians will reflect the educational system and the attitude that people have in a relationship to what the role of government ought to be. So you're working in the minefields, and when you change these attitudes, and I happen to think things have changed very favorably. I get nice receptions on college campuses. So I think you're doing great work, and you should continue to do this and get as many new teachers out there as possible. That, to me, makes the difference. And if all you have to do is look at presidential campaigns, I don't know how I even went through that stuff, for so many years. But I was always hoping there'd be one or two people out there listening. But I want to thank you very much for being on today and all the hard work you've done for the cause of liberty. Thank you, everybody.
You're welcome, Dr.
And I want to thank everybody for tuning in to the Liberty Report, and come back soon.
Ron Paul Liberty Report on YouTube. Go check it out, subscribe, and share. We see this war on cash because of a need to control the economy. It kind of goes back to the socialism way of controlling the economy. Basically, how about we just give you a waiver thing that we'll just monitor what you're consuming, control what you're consuming. Get in the bread line, you only get this much bread. So you want to see where this ultra poor is coming from. It's coming from the system clamping down more and more. Now, I have an article here from the economiccollapseblog.com. In the month of September 2015, we officially entered the danger zone. Is September 2015 going to be one of the most important months in modern American history? Which, again, I've been bringing this up that, we have a lot of people talking about September and whether there actually be a event that's going to happen. The simple fear may cause something to happen. So I don't want people to go run out in fear but I want people to be aware that this possibility is there. And again, if you're someone like me that, more of a prepper attitude, it might not be so frightening or fearful, but it's something that you have to be aware of. And it's a good reason for others to start just here and there preparing as much as possible, just in case. But it says here, when I issued my first ever red alert for the last 6 months of 2015 back in June, I was particularly concerned with the months of September through December, and not just for economic reasons. All the intel that I have received is absolutely screaming that big trouble is ahead. So enjoy these last few days of relative peace and quiet. I mean that sincerely. In fact, that is exactly what I've been doing. Over the past week, I have not posted any articles because I was spending time with family, friends, and preparing for the National Call to Prayer on September 18th and 19th. But now, as we enter the chaotic month of September 2015, I have feelings that there is going to be plenty for me to write about. At this time last month, I declared that we were entering the pivotal month of August 2015. That's exactly what it turned out to be. August was the worst month overall for stocks in 3 years, and it was the worst month of August for U.S. financial markets in 17 years. Throughout history, there have only been 11 times that the S&P has declined by more than 5% during the month of August. When that has happened, the stock market has almost always fallen in September as well. September is the only month in which the S&P 500 fell more frequently than it rose. What's more, in the 11 times that the S&P 500 fell by more than 5% in August, it declined in 80% of the subsequent Septembers and fell an average of nearly 4%. Last week, there was a rally after the initial crash. I warned that this would happen in advance, and we have seen a similar pattern play out during almost every market collapse throughout history. The following comes from John Hussman. As I noted earlier this year, see a better lesson than this time is different. Market crashes have tended to unfold after the market has already lost 10 to 14%, and the recovery from that low fails. Prior pre-crash bounces have generally been in the 6 to 7% range, which is what we observed last week. So I certainly don't see that bounce as having removed any of our concerns. We remain extremely alert to the prospect for much more extended market losses. So how far could stocks eventually fall? Huntsman is projecting that we could ultimately see the market decline by more than 50%. We fully expect a 40 to 55% market loss over the completion of the present market cycle. Such a loss would only bring valuations to levels that have been historically run off the mill. One thing that could accelerate stock market losses this time around is the fact that people have been borrowing lots and lots of money to buy stocks. That works when the stock market just keeps going up, but once the market turns, the margin calls can lead to panic selling on a massive scale. The following comes from a recent piece by Wolf Richer, in which he describes some of the chaos that we have already been witnessing. Energy stocks and bonds crashed, even those of some large companies like Chesapeake. Some have reached zero. All kinds of other stocks and bonds have gotten eviscerated over the past few months. Even tech darlings like Twitter or biotech giant Biogen portfolios with a focus on the wrong momentum stocks took a very serious hit. And margin calls went out, the journal. Some lenders, including Bank of America Corp., are issuing margin calls to clients after the global market drooping in the past week, forcing investors to choose between either putting up more money or selling some of the securities underlying the loans. Other banks to sent out margin calls, including U.S. Trust, Morgan Stanley, and Wells Fargo, according to the journal. With margin calls mucking up the scenario, spooked investors are trying to lower their leverage before they're forced to, and the boom in securities-based lending appears to be over, and the wealth units of the banks that gorged on these loans are likely to see their profits dented. If that continues, a much crummier thing happens. Margin balance reverse, and the last two times they did, after a majestic record-breaking spike, the stock market crashed. For some more technical reasons, why another wave to the downside is coming, see an excellent article entitled Red Alert for Second Crash Downwave by Clive P. Maund, M-A-U-N-D, that you can find right here, and there's a link there. And you can read the rest of the article. It goes on a little bit further, and some more article links on there. But it seems whoever you're talking to, whether it be Keynesian economists or more Austrian economics, it really gets to a point that neither one is really seeing a positive outlook. Now, you might have a few of them go on your propaganda mainstream TV and, oh, yeah, it's going to rally. Oh, yeah, it's going to rally. Don't worry. It's all good. And every time we see our economy blacked out of the news cycle for that day, we see a come up. Right now, I went through a lot of outlets looking for talk about the economy on their front page. None. I couldn't find any. I didn't get to visit all of them, but I really haven't seen any talk about it. Guess what? It's gone up a little bit, but it's so minute compared to our losses. Minute. And it's not going to get better because they're not allowing it to actually correct. They're trying to manipulate it from falling, which only just kind of furthers the pain because it's going to fall. And this, I really believe, is going to be a global collapse. And, one thing I do is I keep gold and silver, and I tell you guys about Amagi Metals and how you can support this broadcast and prepare for the future. One hedge is gold and silver. It's not a save all, but it is one tool that you can have in your bag. And again, that link is antityrannynews.com/metal. And that'll take you to Amagi Metals, but they are running low. They are running low on a lot of their supply. I've been looking for another distributor or two to maybe add to the group that I would feel safe going through. And right now I'm sticking with Amagi, though, because they are the people I do my business with, and I try to bring that to the table. But they're also getting to a point where they're running low on supplies, so having a backup for that is crucial. But I'm finding that a lot of the distributors that I would go through, that I would choose, that I believe are more liberty-minded, not just profit-driven, people that are also backing a lot of alternative media and libertarian groups, they're running out too. So check them out while they still have supplies. That's antityrannynews.com/metal, and that'll take you to Amagi Metals. And don't forget, in this day of age where we're looking at multiple crises, the chances of multiple crises happening at the same time, a global economic collapse, you have to be prepared. And we know that more can follow, even if it starts off with just the economic collapse. So if you're looking for preparedness gear, check out UCY.TV's Amazon store. Go to UCY.TV, click the UCY store tab, and check them out. UCY has put together a collection of great camping preparation and radiation preparation gear. One of the best selections I've seen out there. Go check them out. At the same time, you're getting the same great deals on Amazon and the same great shipping deals. And at the same time, you're helping out UCY.TV and all the great broadcasts here on UCY.TV. Now, we also know that we're facing this this chance for a global economic collapse. But one thing I've also pointed out is I believe that it's being furthered along, and there's another agenda behind it when it comes to countries like China and Russia. And I believe it has to do with the currency war, and I think the U.S. is really losing their end of this. We've had the petrodollar, the dollar, U.S. dollar is the world currency, reserve currency for a long time, and I really think it's coming to end. China, Russia, European countries, South American countries have all been kind of signing on to these new banking systems that are being put in place. And then I see this article that came from theweek.com, and then I seen it again in red on Drudge Report. Chinese warship spotted off the coast of Alaska. President Obama isn't the only one making a visit to Alaska this week. According to a new report from Pentagon officials, the U.S. military has spotted 5 Chinese Navy ships off the coast of Alaska in the Bering Sea, heading in the direction of the Aleutian Islands. The presence of the Chinese ships, including 3 combat ships, a replenishment vessel, and a amphibious ship, marks the first time that the U.S. military has reported seeing any such activity in the area. The Wall Street Journal reports. Although China's defense ministry could not be reached by the journal for comment, the presence of Chinese warships close to U.S. territory is likely connected to China's efforts to ramp up its military activity as the economic power expands. I don't think we characterize anything they're doing as threatening, one defense official told the Wall Street Journal. Other officials theorize that the ship's presence could be due to China's growing interest in using the Northern Sea route to transport goods, since the route between Asia and the West can be up to several days faster than the Suez Canal route. It's difficult to tell exactly, but it indicates some interest in the Arctic region. One Pentagon official said, "It's different." And again, that was at theweek.com. I don't know if that's all the article. Let me make sure I got it all here. I don't think that was. I think that was just the front page. Nope, that wasn't the full article. So you can check that out at theweek.com, but I think it shows that China is kind of no longer at any way threatened with the U.S. I think a lot of countries are seeing the U.S. kind of diminish as a world power. Okay, sorry, I was trying to bring something up. I'm having a couple issues, but they're working now. I want to get into this clip once I get it back up here. I'll log back in here. Maybe. Now, according to AMTV, he believes that war with China is fast approaching. So I'm going to play this clip here from Christopher Green of AMTV.
Are you prepared? A few years ago, I was in a building fire when I lived in Washington, D.C. I lived on the 7th floor, and what had happened is on the 6th floor, an electrical fire broke out. And I remember it happening very quickly. Suddenly, my heart began to pound. I could hear the fire engines roaring up the street. I knew something was wrong. Smoke began to enter my apartment unit. I didn't really know what to do. I wish I would have known about this product, the SkySaver. Check it out at skysaver.com. Your personal life-saving repelling device. In that situation, in the event of a building fire like I was in, or an act of terrorism, or any other emergency, all I would have had to do at that given point in time is click, hook, and exit, and repel my way to the ground to safety. Holds up to 300 pounds, repels up to 260 feet, tested to the highest quality standards. That's a SkySaver at skysaver.com. Check it out today, your personal life-saving backpack. Click the link below right now. Hey everybody, I'm Christopher Green. You're tuning into AMTV, Alternative Media Television. It is Wednesday, September 2nd, 2015, as we approach September 11th. In fact, maybe that's the reason the President of the United States, Barack Obama, is in Alaska, probably hanging out with Sarah Palin, about to go down into their bunker before war ensues. The inevitability of war as China engages in one of its largest military parades ever, commemorating its alleged victory over Japan during World War II, even though that's debatable. And the mainstream media here in the West, in the United States, says it's all propaganda coming out of China. They'll say things like the Chinese financial system is heavily manipulated to keep the Shanghai Composite above 3,000, how they keep funneling all this money into the system to prop up a phony market. But the mainstream media will never say the same thing about the United States, how it's just as manipulated here in the U.S., courtesy of propaganda bullshit machines like CNN and Fox News, or how Wall Street is manipulated here in the United States, or our political system is manipulated here. You know, the phony two-party paradigm, which really is just one singular party of total control and power, that makes up this control grid, that makes up the regime that is the United States of America today. People wonder why people like me come on camera every day and basically push the envelope of free speech. It's because it's hanging by a frigging thread. So Obama also, I believe, shot a reality TV show in Alaska. It's amazing that the Alaskan people would have open arms to this guy. I mean, aren't they conservative? Aren't they pro-gun and Second Amendment? I mean, why would they want the president in their hometown? Well, the president is prophesying doom and gloom, the end of the world backed by science. Science tells him things. He's now a scientist, even though he studied political science. He's not a scientist or an expert on climate change. Has this big push right now. Again, he's prophesying doom and gloom, fires and wind and floods and all these things to push his agenda that these carbon emissions, due to coal companies and stuff that he's been, actively pushing against recently, even though his butt buddies, people like George Soros, have been buying the companies on the cheap. I mentioned this in a couple of videos ago, BTU, Peabody Energy. George Soros bought it like 99 cents. It's now trading at like $2.30 or $2.50 a share. It's been a clear double, a clear winner. All this heavy manipulation by the U.S. government and Wall Street. So Obama's over there, he's in Alaska on some kind of tour, some kind of multi-million-dollar vacation while he still negotiates with Iran, and China ramps up and prepares for war along with Russia. You notice how the news cycle of the mainstream media, it's very up and down. It's very hyperbolic, and then it'll hit a trough, and then hyperbolic, and then it'll hit a trough. It'll be like Trayvon Martin, and then nothing, and then Freddie Gray, and then nothing, and then Ferguson riots, and then nothing, and then a Texas sheriff is shot, and then nothing. They don't give you too long, but we're definitely at that trough now. Usually I have a pretty good idea what's coming next. I can see it based on the bullshit propaganda machine that makes up the mainstream media. I'm always one step ahead of them, as many of you are. But the only real thing I see next, the only thing that's really clear at this given point in time, this snapshot that makes up the trough, is that war is fast approaching. War drums are fast approaching. Now, we're also approaching September 11th. Remember when Hillary Clinton told us that the Benghazi terror attack that happened on the anniversary of September 11th had nothing to do with terrorism or September 11th, even though that turned out to be a total lie? And still, as they're releasing all these classified emails that she burned, and I'm sure we've only got like a tenth of 1% of the actual classified content moving in and out of her personal email servers that she destroyed, which again is a criminal act and then should put her and pound her in the ass prison along with her husband, who lied on the stand not too long ago and perjured himself in front of the American public. Again, an illegal act that would send your ass to prison, but not these people. Remember when she told us it had something to do with like a YouTube video or something, the innocence of Muslims, even though that was total and utter bullshit? It was a lie. So again, we approach war, the war drums. To war. Russia and China engaging in war games recently. All of this revolving around global economics, this paradigm that makes up the New World Order today, this power structure that makes up the mainstream media, not just in China, or the financial markets, not just in China, or the political system, not just in China, but also relates here in the United States of America. Again, we're no different. We're just as heavily manipulated, propagandized. It's just as much of a joke as it is in China. Again, it's why few people like me and good people like you are pushing the envelope on free speech on a daily basis, because it's literally hanging by a friggin' thread. Also, news that came out a couple of days ago, Wayne Dyer died. I liked a lot of his concepts, the things that he talked about, and I kind of overlooked it a little bit. This happened again a couple days ago. I think he was like 75. There's things I don't like about him. He was a huge Obama supporter, friends with Oprah Winfrey, another person that I hate. But a lot of the things he talked about I thought were really cool, very interesting. He talked a lot about the Tao. You know, how we're born into this world from nothingness, naked, and then we become part of this world, and we become attached to things. We value who we are based on our ego. So much is guided by our own ego, what people think of us, how society values us, the things that we own, even though they really own us, according to the work of Buddha. And then we leave naked into nothingness. We come into the world from nothingness naked as a baby. We become part of this world. We become attached to things that mean nothing in the grand scheme, and then leave naked and into nothingness based on his talks, whether or not you believe there's an afterlife or not, or it's just a black hole and it's nothingness. And I always thought his concepts were really cool because there was a lot of truth to it. You know, again, how we put so much attachment to the things that we own, that really own us, or how society views us, or how our people view us, or, you know, the career that we have, or the job that we have, or how much money we have in our pockets somehow values who we are. When again, we came from God. We came from, whether you believe that or not, or nothingness. We came naked into the world with nothing. We had nothing. We were, as the reality TV shows we see on TV, naked and afraid. And we leave naked and afraid. And I just found it, you know, very interesting. I find it interesting how things repeat themselves, how history repeats itself, how war is repeating itself now, how the economic landscape is repeating itself right now. Again, the only thing clear at this given point, this snapshot in history, is that war is on the horizon. China, Russia, engaging in some of the largest, greatest war games we have ever seen in recent history. The United States crumbling economically, losing our status as world reserve currency, as John Kerry, Secretary of State, just mentioned to us a couple videos ago. Remember that used to be crackpot conspiracy theory? Well, now it's just reality. Obama, who's basically on the way out of his two-term, you know, political destruction of the United States of America, where he basically just pissed on and torched the U.S. Constitution. Now the advent of more political upheaval through Donald Trump, the anti-establishment movement, the anti-politician, anti-political movement, and, you know, the 2016 election as we approach. You know, all these things I think can be positives. I think that we can change things. I think people like Donald Trump could potentially be good for the country. This anti-political correctness is good. But what we really need isn't this engagement of a two-party broken system, which really is just one party, this power system, this control system, this grid. What we need is real change. You know, the lie Obama sold us. We need real reform. We need activism. You know, I think we've already had the intellectual revolution to a certain extent. I think consciousness and awareness has been raised. A lot of this through modern technology. We've lived through it, you and I, over the past few years as a part of this technological revolution, the new industrial revolution, this information age, this information war. But in addition to that, we also need some kind of physical revolution. And where is this going to come from? You know, as the Western media always talks about how China's very afraid of a revolution, you know, they're jailing people that supposedly sold the market short, which shouldn't be illegal activity, or journalists that are breaking stories. We have the same control systems and the same control grid and the same power structure and the same illusion here in the United States of America. You know, most Americans are ignorant of it. And if they're not ignorant of it, if they see the illusion, a lot of them don't care. You know, it's amazing to me how complacent the U.S. actually is, how complacent Americans actually are. And I think that is soon to abruptly change, especially as we approach war. I want to hear from you. What do you think's coming next? What do you see in this snapshot in time, this trough that makes up the bullshit mainstream media hyperbolic emotional roller coaster and actual real tangible events in the name of these war games, in the name of the establishment of a new world reserve currency and the yuan, with Russia and China working together, this alleged deal, which just really shows you that the United States has no negotiating power or room left, negotiating with Iran, one of our great enemies that still calls us the great Satan. What do you see? What do you think's coming to the United States? How does this information revolution, this heightening of our awareness and consciousness translate into a physical revolution in real life? Where are we headed? I'm Christopher Green. Get this video out everywhere, make it viral, hard-hitting it in your face, and click the link below to support our sponsor.
AMTV, Christopher Green. Now, we have a lot of different things. Sorry about that. I'm having a couple issues here. Give me a second. I think I have it solved now. We have a lot of different issues, and I think the whole Chinese, the dollar, our economic stance right now, Russia and China hoarding gold, and other countries kind of going, you know what, they got more to offer, are going to affect us. By the end of this year, we will, most of us, if you're listening to this broadcast, will be seeing the results of this. It might take longer for others, though. Now, when we look at what's going on domestically, we also are seeing a lot of stuff coming to the surface in the political sphere when it comes to people like Clinton. Obama stuff is pretty much out there. The way the Supreme Court is ruling, Trump, being at the top of the polls. We're seeing a lot of we're in bizarro world. And I read the article on a different broadcast. I think I did. But it talked about, really, we are starting to see the beginnings of a society that is reminiscent of the movie Idiocracy. And I think that to be true to an extent. Now, one thing that is going on that people are kind of ramping up for, I got one here from truthandmedia.com. Bros, privacy advocates prepare for battle over cybersecurity bill. The Cybersecurity Information Sharing Act, CISA, C-I-S-A, which is designed to allow private companies to easily share threat intelligence with government agencies, is facing resistance from privacy advocates who fear that the provisions will only increase the indiscriminate monitoring of legal activity. CISA is seen as a cousin to another controversial cybersecurity bill, the Cybersecurity Intelligence Sharing and Protection Act, CISPA, which was defeated by mass opposition in 2012. In early August, the White House gave the CISA a boost through an official endorsement, the Hill reported. Cybersecurity is an important national security issue, and the Senate should take up this bill as soon as possible and pass it, said White House spokesman Eric Schultz in a statement. Sorry. The endorsement will increase pressure on Senate leaders to reach an agreement to limit floor debate and come to a final vote on the bill, which would increase the data shared on hackers between companies and the government before the month-long break. The National Journal also released new information related to CISA on August 26. The journal reported on 22 proposed amendments to CISA. When the bill is eventually debated, the senators will have to work their way through each amendment. It's a pretty big article. You can read the rest of the article there. But what we know from all the cybersecurity bills that they try to push through and ram through, they all actually give up your privacy, your security. So they, like most of the bills that are passed, they do absolutely the opposite of what they say they're going to do. Or do they? Do they do exactly what they say they're going to do, but only for government? That means government needs all this privacy, so you have to give yours up. And, you know, another thing that they're doing to attack people is, well, they love attacking families and pushing these agendas. One thing they like doing is with these, whether it be Occupy movement, Black Lives Matter, this LGBT crap that goes on. And, you know, I have no problem with these people. You do whatever the hell you want. I'll say how to your business. You stay out of mine. I'm not here to fight people. But that's the problem. They tend to push it, and people go, well, gays aren't pushing nothing. They're just asking for equal treatment. No, they push things. And there was one example that's been in headlines. And it's something that we're seeing nationwide, where we're having this push to, well, if a boy thinks he's a girl, he can use a girl's restroom and locker rooms. And most parents of girls are going, no. Well, here's an article here. Let me get back to it. It'll take me a second here. This one, high school girls stage walkout to protest transgender student in their bathroom. Schools found to have violated a student's civil rights are at risk of losing some of their federal funding. Says here, in the middle of last school year, Leela Perry came out as transgender. Before that, she had been living as a gay male. I'm going to say he. You can think whatever you want, but that doesn't change the physical aspect of you. And just like fake boobs are fake boobs, you have something taken off, that doesn't mean anything. Someone has a leg removed doesn't mean they're less human. But that's not who she really was. Um, no longer was she going to pretend, Leela said. So this year she told teachers and administrators at Hillsborough High School, where she is a senior, that she would no longer be content to use a unisex facility or faculty bathroom. She wanted to be treated like other female students, including access to bathrooms and locker rooms for girls. Her decision spread quickly through the small Jefferson County School District, and on Monday morning, students of Hillsborough High School walked out in protest. During the walkout, Leela was locked in the principal's office. She said she and administrators worried about his safety. The student walkout came on the heels of a school board meeting Thursday and drew a large crowd. Parents concerned that Leela is getting special rights under the expense of other students. Most of the students at Monday's protest were opposed to accommodations for him. A smaller group gathered in support. Leela Perry, a senior and transgender student at Hillsborough High School, speaks with the reporters as Blake Childs of Farmington offers his opinion after a student walkout over Perry's request to use the girls' locker rooms. Both supporters and opponents of Perry's request turned out for the morning protest. I have sisters and brothers that go to school, said Childs, 21. I don't want this to grow like wildfire. Leela Perry, second from left, a senior and transgender student at Hillsborough High School, speaks with friends Genia Warfel, left, Skylar Thompson, and Haley Reeves following a student walkout held in support and opposition to Perry's request to use the girls' locker rooms. The girls have rights and they shouldn't have to share a bathroom with a boy, said Tammy Sorden, who has a son at Hillsborough High School. It's fine to be different, she said, but it's not right to give Leela special treatment while the girls just have to suck it up. Students and parents interviewed after the walkout were overwhelmingly in support of keeping Leela, 17, out of the school facilities for girls. But the school's Gay Straight Alliance and other supporters held a counter-protest to show that not everyone is in agreement. Some students on both sides left after school administrators broke up the protest. Supporters of Leela said they did not feel comfortable going back into the school. Opponents said leaving school was a continuation of showing their position. Leela said she has dropped out of her physical education class because there is little supervision and makes her uncomfortable. And she rarely uses the bathroom now while at school. Still, Leela said she should be able to use the facilities girls use. I wasn't hurting anyone. I didn't want to be in something gender neutral, she said, referring to the faculty bathroom administrators encouraged her to use. I'm a girl. I am not going to be pushed away to another bathroom. Well, the problem is you're not a girl. You are a male that feels like a girl. Different. Girl is not a mindset. It is a physical observation of a gender that nature made you. Okay? Legal issues. High school administrators referred a reporter to Superintendent Aaron D. Kornman. He would not comment about the issue, which has become the talk of the community since classes began in mid-August. He said he had to protect the privacy of students. He did, however, hand a reporter a written statement. It said in part that the district respects the rights of all students and appreciates the fact that the students we are educating are willing to stand on their belief system and to support their cause beliefs through their expression of free speech. Students were allowed to protest through second and third hour classes and were asked to return to class. Kornman's statement also says that the district accepts all students no matter race, nationality, ethnicity, gender and sexual orientation. We will promote tolerance and acceptance of all students that attend our district while not tolerating bullying, harassing behaviors of any type in any form. Leela said the school administrators have been very supportive and is working to make her feel welcome. They have allowed her to use the facilities used by girls and women. Districts that refuse to allow students to use bathroom for gender with which they identify could run afoul of the U.S. Department of Education's Office of Civil Rights, said Kelly Hopkins of the Missouri School Boards Association. Well, I would tell them to take their money and shove it up their butt. But it says here the Office of Civil Rights has issued an opinion that says if you do this, you have engaged in gender discrimination, Hopkins said. At the same time, there is no case law or statute in Missouri that says this is against the law. Schools found to have violated a student's civil rights are at risk of losing some of their federal funding, Hopkins said. Out in public, several people interviewed outside Hillsborough High on Monday argued that the student who still has male genitalia should not be allowed into a changing room with teenage girls. I'm not comfortable with it, said Brittany Hemos, a 2008 Hillsborough graduate who was at the school to pick up her brother. There's nothing wrong with being different, but when you are different, there are sacrifices. Shortly after the protest, Jeff Childs, 47, and his son, Blake, 21, both of Farmington, drove onto the high school parking lot with Girls' Rights Matter painted on the sides and tailgate of the Ford pickup. When they were told by police to leave, they went to a Dollar General store, bought poster boards and markers, and made signs that they held at the busy entrance to the high school. This needs to stop before it goes too far, said Childs, who has a niece and nephew who go to an elementary school in Hillsborough. I'm not trying to be ignorant, but the transgender student is bringing it out in public for everybody else to deal with. Skylar Thompson, 16, refers to Leela as her best friend. She said Leela often stays at Skylar's house overnight while Leela's family tries to come with grips with their child identifying as transgender. She is such a good person. They are judging her on the outside, Scott said of those who have been critical of Leela. Well, yeah, when it comes to locker rooms, girls getting naked, and a boy that in their mind feels like a girl is getting naked or has the ability to get naked or see the girls naked. Yeah, that becomes a problem. Leela wears a long brown wig with bobby pins keeping the hair from her eyes. On Monday, her outfit included a short blue skirt and wedges. She is choosing her life to better herself, to better accept herself, said friend Gina Warfare, 16. I don't know what there is to discriminate about that. I really support the bravery she has. Hopkins of the Missouri School Boards Association said she is having to explain to school boards with more frequency how the federal government views treatment of transgender students. I got no calls on this 5 years ago, she said. I've gotten at least half a dozen recently. So, we have this constant pushing, and people go, well, you gotta understand, we're changing everybody's routine and comfortability for one person. You're making it not inviting, comfortable, or safe place for these girls to do their privacy business, that's a problem. He can think that he's a girl. He can dress like a girl, be a girl in every way that he wants to, but he is still a guy to them. He can identify to himself whatever he feels. But they still see him as a guy, and the girls, it doesn't matter what he feels. That's the problem. He feels. Well, yeah, we all feel. But in the end of the day, that's male genitalia in the same facility as young girls. Vice versa. You know, despite what you might have seen in movies, high school girls aren't just undressing in front of boys all the time. Nor would they feel safe doing that. You might have a couple, but every society does. But making the majority of the girls feel unsafe and feel sexualized in front of a male figure that they don't want to feel that way around, feeling like they don't have that privacy from the males because, well, that male says he feels like a girl. I'm sure if they press the issue to the point where there's no debating whether they can be in the, well, there's going to be a lot of boys. Yep, I feel like I'm a her too, so let me use that room. And then we got the immigration problem here in the U.S. And people know me as a libertarian. I'm for open borders. I really do. But the problem is you can't have open borders when you have a tax code, a monetary policy, and a government in a state that is taking from one person to give to these other people. You'll never get open borders because basically you're playing Robin Hood when you're taking from people here to give to people that you want to come here. It's being used as propaganda. It's being used as a voting tool for Democrats, definitely. But the problem isn't that we have immigrants come in the country. The problem is you're taxed, you're fought against for your wealth to give to these people for they can vote against things that you believe in. If it gives them, puts money in their pocket, they're going to vote for that. Definitely when they come from a country where they couldn't have anything. But we're not the only ones. And we're also seeing, Islamic extremist material come across our border. But the EU and a lot of Europe is just dealing with this to the point that it's becoming evident what's happening, and it's coming here too because we have agendas being pushed. So they're going to allow things to happen. That's where the people go, false flag, that the planes weren't there when they hit the towers. They nothing hit the tower. It was all Project Bluebeam. When you look at it, no, it's they allow things to happen and then use that as an excuse. You do have instances where they might even push someone to do something, but they'll always let someone else get their hands dirty. Someone else still has to make that conscious decision to do it. Same thing with border control. They allow certain people in because they know that it will cause problems. You tell them they have to let illegals across the border. They go, okay, and then we'll make sure that even the bad ones are definitely coming in because then It's a fight for control. Well, I have one more Ron Paul Liberty report I do want to get into, and this is refugee crisis, demise of the EU.
Hello, everybody, and thank you for tuning in to the Liberty Report. With me today is Daniel McAdams. Daniel, good to see you.
Good morning, Dr. Paul.
I'd like to talk about a humanitarian crisis. We know about a humanitarian crisis in the Middle East with all the wars going on, but now it's spreading. It's a consequence of the Mideast crisis there, and now affecting Europe. And it has to do with immigrants, and America has a little bit of experience with immigrants coming in, and it's the country that is targeted is Turkey, and the country is
it's Hungary. Yeah,
they're all going to Hungary right now.
Yeah.
But I'd like to point that out on the map if we could to show exactly where they're coming from and where they're going. And there's a pretty good map on this, and Hungary is in the center of Europe. And yet a lot of the immigrants are coming from the Middle East and Africa, and it looks like things are getting much worse. Well, how many people are going into Hungary right now?
Well, they say about 3,000 a month are coming in. Already 3,000 a day. Already 150,000 have gone into Hungary, and they go up through Greece, and then they go up through Macedonia. You can see on the map. And then through Serbia, and then up into Hungary. And then Hungary is sort of their launching pad into Germany and other countries that are more wealthy countries in Western Europe.
Well, when I look at the map, it always fascinates me. Why are they going to Hungary? They're going great distances. Why don't they stop in Italy? Why don't they stop in Greece and these different places? It must be the local governments there that have resisted it.
Well, the ones that are going through Greece by EU law, they should be registered as refugees there. And that's the problem that Hungary's having, is that really Greece is a basket case. As we know, they can't control anything. And so they're not registering them as refugees because they have no way of taking care of them. So Hungary is facing hundreds of thousands of people sleeping in the train station. Transportation is ground to a halt, and they don't know what to do with them. The EU is providing no guidance whatsoever except to criticize them when they try to send them on, or prevent them from sending them on. No matter what they do, they're getting criticized. So
it's also fascinating to me to hear the promise from the German government, we'll take in 800,000. And I just wonder how serious they are. That would relieve, Hungary a little bit if they were going to take a lot of these. But for some reason, I can't see that happening. And did they really check with the German people to accept that many? That would be a big thing for Germany to deal with, too.
Imagine some small German village overrun with people who really share nothing in common. But, on the other side of the coin is David Cameron, the Prime Minister of the UK, who said, we're not taking any. We've had it. When it comes time for them, of course, to ride along and bomb these places that cause all the chaos, they're first in line. But when it comes time to face the unintended or intended consequences of the chaos, they say, no, we don't want any refugees.
Well, I think the crisis we're seeing right now was probably not an intended consequence by the neocons, but the neocons and our foreign policy has some responsibility that they should assume, because where these immigrants, the large number coming from the Middle East, Afghanistan, Iraq, and Syria now, and Syria's been in total chaos, and they're leaving. So it's a failed policy there. But it's also very likely a failed policy of Europe. I was always skeptical of a unified Europe. Not that you couldn't have a unified Europe if you had an understanding of free trade and friendship with neighboring countries, but to try to make it one country and try to get all the different factions to come together is chaotic. And now I think we're witnessing this because there's no absorption of even a few people. And there's, it looks like, I think, could be the lead to the breakup of the European Union, just as the economic factors are leading to this breakup as well.
Already the strains are being felt strongly. The Schengen Agreement, which is the mechanism by which within the EU there are no borders, so there are free travel of goods and people within the EU. Essentially, it breaks down national sovereignty you don't police your own border. But that is now breaking down in Italy, where a lot of migrants, as we saw from the map earlier, have gone up through Italy, and from Italy they want to go into Germany, and Italy has asked to suspend the Schengen agreements at that point in northern Italy to stop some of this migration.
You know, there's a lot of different types of humanitarian crises. I mean, you can have natural disasters, you can have hurricanes and tsunamis, and you can have all these other natural things that really causes a crisis. But this is man-made. This is government-made. This is a consequence of bad foreign policy and bad economic policy. And it's, as far as I'm concerned, all preventable. And yet nobody stops and thinks about, how did the policies, did we have how much have we contributed to this? And I think that's the only thing beneficial that could come from this if we reassessed our policies and other countries did the same thing.
Well, you know, the mainstream media loves to focus on this as if it was a crisis that simply appeared out of nowhere. Right. They'll show poor people's faces, they've traveled, children and babies, and they act as if it just sort of like a mushroom. It just grew up in the grass one morning. They never look at what were the causative factors. And of course, when you come to Libya and Syria, you have a U.S. and EU policy of regime change and destabilization. They say that half the population of Syria has fled the country because of these last 4 years of U.S. regime change policy. But of course, when the media even mentions it at all, they'll say, well, two things. It's all Assad's fault, or B, if we had only gone in there and invaded right away and overthrew, then it wouldn't have happened.
And, of course, the European Union compounds these problems because there's supposed to be no borders. If you're a citizen of one country, you're supposed to be able to travel back and forth. So all they have to do is plant themselves down in one country, and this really gives them access to the European Union entirely. And that is now, you know, a major factor. And as you say, the British don't want them, and I don't think the German people are going to want them. And then this is going to lead to even more trouble. You know, it's a long way from changing foreign policy and maybe introducing people to free market economics. Maybe the economic factors would be diminished a great deal. And of course, the chaos and the killing that goes on that we so often participate in, that wouldn't exist either.
It's hard to rebuild the economy after, for example, in Libya, all the infrastructure was targeted. So we talk about bringing them democracy and freedom, but you destroy any possibility for them to rebuild their economies.
Yeah. So. Well, you know, we've mentioned now about the chaos in the Middle East, dealing with Syria and Iraq and that whole area. And right now, we get more news from, I thought, somewhat discredited General Petraeus. Now they're talking to him, and he has a solution for all this. He thinks that what we ought to do is use Al-Qaeda to defeat ISIS.
Yeah, exactly. He was in charge of the CIA when the regime change was launched in 2011, the U.S. efforts. And now, as of this last week, he's caused a bit of a stir because he thinks that we should embrace Al-Qaeda now in our fight against ISIS. And I was wondering as I read it, you know, because you remember the authorization for the use of military force in the NDAA. I'm wondering if he's about to be droned for saying such a thing.
Yeah, and he also claims that he was successful in Iraq with the surge. And look at what's happening in Iraq. And, you know, our government right now hasn't said, oh, yeah, we're going to listen to Petraeus. There's a little hands off. But the fact that he's out there and getting public attention, he's putting these issues out. But they've been involved with this Mickey Mouse around, favoring one faction against another faction. So it's the same old story. To think that David Petraeus has an answer to this is totally bizarre. If we do what he says, we're going to have more refugees. It's going to get much bigger, and there'll be no signs of this ever being resolved.
And not only him, but Ambassador Robert Ford, who was the U.S. ambassador in Syria, who took an active role in supporting the coup and the attacks on the Syrian government. He says we need to talk to actually a different Al-Qaeda faction, not the Nusra faction. So it shows that they're absolutely desperate. They were absolutely sure this would be a cakewalk, like they said about Iraq. And now when it's turned into a disaster, they want to look for something. They want to blame someone. They're desperate for something.
Yeah, they're desperate enough to go back to the guy that helped create the monster. And yet the message here is what we have been doing has been a complete failure. And they're not quite saying that, but that's what they're admitting. And it's back and forth, more of the same thing. So, and then you talk to a neocon, listen to them on TV. You listen to Lindsey Graham, troops on the ground, the Cheneys, they're pumping it up, and more troops and more money and more war. And it seems like they're rarely challenged in a serious way on the convention media. They just accept this stuff, and even in the campaign right now, how many of the candidates are saying, back off a little bit?
Yeah. Well, the way they portray it is that if we had only gone in more, but the fact of the matter is, you don't have to love Assad to recognize that before 2011, half the people in the country weren't leaving. So whether he's a good guy or a bad guy, it doesn't matter from our perspective. This disaster wasn't happening.
Well, I think that was a similar circumstance with Saddam Hussein. Saddam Hussein, when he was being challenged by outsiders, he went and literally and physically passed out rifles to all his citizens. And so therefore, he was not threatened by the citizens. He was threatened by outsiders. And the same way with Assad, he's far from perfect. But think of where it is right now, and it is a mess. But I see no way that things can be improved as long as we pursue this foreign policy, because of all those groups. We're with one group one day and against them the next day, and there's new groups all lining up of who's going to be in charge when Assad finally goes, which is an obsession with us. We have to get rid of them. But they come together with one issue, one reason why they remain in the fight and at times work with each other, and that's get rid of foreign invaders. They want to get rid of the foreign invaders, and about 99% of the foreign invaders are U.S. soldiers and U.S. policymakers and U.S. bombs and U.S. interference.
Yes, exactly. And remember, Petraeus' 2007 surge, this great victory that the press still talks up, it involved arming a lot of these Sunni tribesmen who later went on and became ISIS and started fighting against us. So
right. It's a shame to see what has happened here so far in this new century, because the last century sort of ended with a victory that defeated communism. I think that was the greatest victory of the 20th century. After all the Nazism and fascism and communism, the events showed that communism did not work. Unfortunately, we jumped to the conclusion that we had an empire to defend, and Keynesian economics would solve all our problems. Print money, spend money, debt doesn't matter, and we will bring peace to the world, and we'll make them all good Democrats. But right now, what I see, and this crisis we see in Europe, is the failure of government policies, failure of Keynesian manipulation, failure of central banking, failure of this policy that we have these troops in 150 countries. So in some ways, I think that this is in a great transition period, because this cannot continue. The big danger is what will the results be? Will it be total poverty for more and more nations and total war? Or can we wise up and say, yes, these policies have failed, and the American people should lead the charge on this. The policies are lousy, and yet they're always pouncing on more and more of this. At the same time, on economic policies, the worse the economy gets, the more they even talk about even introducing some type of socialism to this country and authoritarianism to this country. But we live in an age which is ending, and that is the Keynesian model does not work, and our empire does not work. It is a total failure out there, and it has to change. So what we need to do is present the alternative. And for me, the alternative is free markets, free society, civil liberties, and a foreign policy where we mind our own business and take care of the people here by introducing an old-fashioned idea of peace and prosperity, something that we were told about in our early years, but it seems like we have forgotten. If we did that, things could become much better in this country, and we could set a standard for the world. I want to thank everybody for tuning in today, and please come back soon.
Ron Paul Liberty Report on YouTube. Ron Paul Liberty Report on YouTube. And let me get this next article up here. Okay, this one from antimedia.org. Jerry Seinfeld responds after cop shuts down his kids' lemonade stand. New York, last week, Jerry Seinfeld and his son set up a lemonade stand in the family's East Hampton, New York neighborhood. Seinfeld and son, along with a few neighborhood friends, were raising money for his wife's baby buggy charity. Everything was going well until the lemonade stand had a run-in with the law. According to Counter Current News, one of their neighbors called the police to complain. Sure enough, the police jumped at the chance to rush over and shut down another lemonade stand. Jerry didn't want the cops to get away with shutting down their innocent lemonade stand without capturing a chance to make fun of the cops. Jerry's response: the Seinfeld family, along with his son's two friends, decided to mock the cops by posting a picture as if they had been arrested. Jessica Seinfeld's Instagram followers instantly joined in ridiculing the police for their crime-fighting activities. What can you do? You live in a seedy town from the wrong side of the tracks, one commentator said jokingly. Lemons are a gateway fruit to bigger and badder things like vegetables, Countercurrent News documented. While police shutting down criminal lemonade stands is not uncommon, this is the first time a celebrity's child has been subjected to the overbearing police state in such a petty fashion. In what has become a running joke, children's lemonade stands are shutting down all over the country over permit and regulatory violations. Further, heavy-handed regulators and their police thugs are now targeting kids and for other illegal entrepreneurial activities as well. An 11-year-old girl from Madison, Illinois, recently had her illicit cupcake business shut down because it violated the state's food service code. Fortunately, some local governments are making moves to avoid similar PR nightmares by legalizing kids' lemonade stands. The Salt Lake City County Council slashed much of the bureaucratic red tape required for small entrepreneurs in 2013. Making a special exemption for lemonade stands and similar operations run by children. Still, widespread suppression of children's activities begs a dismal question: what kind of country do we live in when setting up a lemonade stand as a child results in a raid by heavy armed police officers? What's next? A SWAT team showing up to verify permits for Girl Scouts selling their cookies door to door? And you can check out that article at the antimedia.org. So go check it out there. And, you know, again, perfect example of rules and regulations being put in place that only hurt the small people. In this case, the children. But even more, these type of regulations will hurt people like the common person that would like to start a business of their own and find regulations only hinder their ability to do so, while the wealthy can benefit off those same regulations. Creating these monopolies. And it really is a problem. And you know, we don't have a lot of people in politics talking about this. When you do, they're pushing for socialism. Companies can't have all the power. Government needs all the power to keep companies from having power. Meaning, basically, no one can profit more than the other person. as a company, which is BS. Then you have people like Donald Trump running for office. Then you have people like Kanye West calling out that he's going to run for office. What? Now, I think something that is pretty funny that came out of this Kanye West thing and the Liberty Movement. You're like, what's the connection there? Liberty Movement and Kanye West? Really? Kanye West says that he wants to run for president in 2020. We also know Adam Kokesh has called that he would run for president in 2020. But when it comes to Kanye West, well, give me a second here. Okay. Now, Kanye West wants to run for president in 2020. Well, where do you think the website's going to be? Kanye West 2020. Well, it's a funny thing. Liberty Fest has hijacked KanyeWest2020.com. If you go to KanyeWest2020.com, it takes you to Liberty Fest New York City 2015, which is, if you want to go directly to it, is lfnyc.com. But again, KanyeWest2020.com will take you to Liberty Fest New York City 2015. Now, more than likely, I'm not going to be able to make it to this, which is always a pain in my butt. But here's some of the people that will be there. Posted 2 weeks ago. Here's one. Jordan Page will be performing at Liberty Fest. Gary Johnson to speak at Liberty Fest. Leslie Marshall speaking. Jeffrey Tucker will be speaking. Lionel will be speaking. Jimmy McMillan, which some people might not know him until I say this. Rent is too damn high. That party? Yeah. He'll be speaking there. Dave Cahill will be performing. Jordan Page again. And Lauren Rumpler to debut new song at Liberty Fest. Melissa Hubert, author of Spanking City Hall, Dominatrix to Political Activist, joins the lineup. Free State Project's president, Carla Garrick, will be speaking. Brooklyn's own Vito and Vito are coming to Liberty Fest. Julia Terensky is going to be speaking. Derek Burrows, Tone Bays, MK Lords, John Bush, Catherine Bleesh, Anthem Blatchard, Zuri Davis, Austin Peterson, Tiffany Madison, Deborah Torres, Danny Panzella, Reem Tahir, Carrie Wedler, which many of you know is Adam Kokesh's former girlfriend, Wayne Dupree, Tabitha Wallace, Carlos Morales, Anthony Freda, Michelle Ray, James Perloff, Cindy Lake, Christian Megan, Jeff Siegel, Josie Wells, Olivia Valentine, and Adam Kokesh, Dave Nolly, Darcy Van, Kathy Reisenwitz, and Kevin Boyd. So they have a extremely large lineup, and if you're able to make it out to that, that's a great event to make it out to, and a large lineup, and probably going to have pretty good numbers this year. I'm suspecting. Give me a second here as I try to get this to work. Maybe. Maybe not. Okay, here we go. Okay, from judgereport.com. Maybe. Maybe not. Huh. Trying to load and it's not wanting to go. Now, it's finally going, but we live in an age where we're having to deal with the NSA and all this. Um, One thing we have is something like, oh yeah, Burning Man Festival, where you have all these people that free spirit and art and all this, but out of DailyMail.com, undercover FBI agents spy on Burning Man Festival to prevent terrorism and test out new intelligence collecting technology. The FBI has admitted to gathering secret intelligence about annual Burning Man Festival since 2010 in response to a request under the 2012 Freedom of Information Act. The Security Service said its Special Events Management Unit has kept files on festival goers, known as burners, to aid in the prevention of terrorist activities and intelligence collection. But the FBI's 16-page response to the question by Inko Kang is heavily redacted, with information about the technology being used to secretly gather the information being blanked out. The revelation comes as the 29th Burning Man takes place in the Black Rock Desert in Nevada. The FBI document describes the festival as a culture of artisan event which promotes sick free expression by the participants. And it seems that any event that you see pop up, whether it be a freedom event, whether it be a Occupy event, whether it be the Burning Man or rock festivals, we're seeing increased use of collection technology in all of it. Tea Party, Occupy, rock festivals, NFL, airport, everything and everywhere you go seems to be being tracked more and more. And it's being done by a government agency, whether it be or not be by the command of the president or his administration. It's going on, and I think it's got two ways to go. Thank y'all.